Thank you, Herman. Let's take Herman's passion and sense of history, and let's drive up those margins in the ballot. So next up, Ryan, our congressional, Ryan Melton for U.S. House of Representatives. Put your hands together for Ryan. Come on up, Ryan.
Is Latifah our timekeeper?
Yes, I am.
How much time do I have?
You have 10 minutes.
Ooh, 10 minutes. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate you. So I want to start by talking about hope in the context of the 4th District congressional race. I was really heartened by the poll results showing that Franklin is within single digits, and I think we're going to see a lot of those closer margins than the experts expect, just from my campaigning I've been doing around the district. But in the context of the 4th District congressional race between myself and my opponent, Congressman Feenstra, the big thing I want us to keep in mind is that just 4 years ago, we almost won that thing. And the Republicans want to make us think all day, every day that Congressman Randy Feenstra is different from Steve King. Really, the only difference is it's not their voting record. They have the same voting record. The difference is that Congressman Feenstra is more subversive because he's smart enough to not say the worst stuff out loud. That's the only difference. So let's go through that list, and we'll see by the end of it why we really have a good shot at this thing. Because the more and more I talk to people in the district about Congressman Feenstra's voting record, the more and more shocked they are by it. So first off, I am the one and only pro-democracy candidate in this race. Why do I say that? Well, Congressman Feenstra was asked what his thoughts were on the January 6th insurrectionists. And I kid you not, he called them wonderful people that just got carried away. He voted against the Trump impeachment, and he voted against the creation of the January 6th committee. Beyond that, as we find out more and more from these January 6th hearings how directly involved Donald Trump was in what happened that day, instead of shying away from Donald Trump, Congressman Feenstra instead gloats and brags about the endorsement he received from Donald Trump earlier in June, unabashedly pro-Trump to this day. We know at this point that an acceptance of Donald Trump's endorsement is a rejection of American democracy.
That's right.
So I'm going to do what I can to preserve and strengthen our democratic institutions so that I can help our 4th District have communities that can thrive long term. And there's a number of reasons that are driving worries about long-term sustainability, namely in the form of population decline. We've seen massive population declines in the 4th District for decades now that have a lot of downstream impacts as far as the well-being of our hospitals, our businesses, our schools, etc. There was a recent Carroll Times article where Congressman Feenstra was touring a new hospital in Carroll, and the hospital administrator told him that they had recently lost $100 million. And one of the primary reasons for that was population decline. They can't get enough patients in. And my opponent had an epiphany in the middle of his first term in Congress. He said, wow, we should probably keep our people here, huh? Yeah, I think we probably should. But it just so happens that my opponent is not the person to get that done. So why is that? Our young people want to build families here, but they don't feel like they have the social infrastructure to make that happen. What does that look like? We need to do a much better job advocating for affordable and accessible childcare and healthcare. We have hundreds of thousands of Iowans right now that live in childcare deserts, where it's very hard to find affordable and accessible childcare. Recent study done showed that if we funded for these gaps in our childcare sector, we would create up to 1 million more jobs here domestically, because we have so many parents that want to work but simply can't, right? What's the Republican answer to our childcare crisis? It's deregulation. It's allowing 16-year-olds to watch kids unsupervised, and it's forcing childcare workers that are already underpaid and overworked to watch even more kids. We have a retention crisis in childcare. That's the last thing we should be doing right now, but that's the Republican answer. And Congressman Feenstra talks all day, every day about how great his relationship is with Governor Reynolds. They're both regressive tax policy Republicans that want to do whatever they can to hamstring our tax base that we need to fund to solve for these gaps here in the district. Also, I'm a believer in a single-payer universal health care plan because our rural hospitals are facing unprecedented stress. There's too much bureaucracy, too limited access, and too many struggles with affordability. So I want to do my part to help our rural hospitals remain robust to serve our communities as well. We've also heard about issues with affordable and accessible housing. I want to do my part to push back against that, against the corporate takeover of home after home after home where they're flipping these to high-rent properties. And we know that our younger generations that are graduating from college are finding it really hard to buy homes right now. And we know that homeownership is one of the vital elements you need to build your independent wealth over time. So I want to do my part to help create more affordable and accessible housing opportunities here in the district as well. But let's say you're a young person and you're lucky enough to have overcome those obstacles. A few years later, your young kids are going to start going into our public education system. My opponent, Congressman Feenstra, and his dear friend, Governor Reynolds, want to do whatever they can to defund public schools. Governor Reynolds has gone all over the state trying to convince us to pull public money out of public schools to fund private school vouchers, but that's not even by far the end of it. Her and her ilk in the state legislature are vilifying our public school teachers. There is a recent NEA survey done that found that over 50% of our public educators are considering early retirement from that field. One of the big reasons cited is underpay, but another big one is the vilification they're facing from politicians, right? Public schools are a great equalizer. I grew up in poverty in Omaha, Nebraska, and no one in my immediate family had ever gone to college and graduated from college. And it seemed like a foreign concept to me, but it took one public school teacher to see the potential that I had. She created a vision for me, and I kid you not, if it wasn't for that one public school teacher, none of this would be happening today. None of it. We need to have a robust public education system so all of our kids have that fighting chance. So many of our kids are going to school hungry, dealing with issues at home, and we need to have public school teachers that are paid, respected, and supported so they can pick our kids up and build better futures for them. So I'm going to defend public schools all day, every day. We also need better paying jobs. We've heard that conversation today too. It was really jarring to me as I was driving throughout the 4th District gathering signatures given the primary ballot, how very successful corporations are still advertising full-time jobs for $10 an hour. We can't build families on that. Common Good Iowa has found, depending upon the county in Iowa, that roughly the living wage now is in the low 20s per hour, right? We're well beyond the $15 per hour conversation, but we're still stuck at 7 and change as far as the federal minimum wage is concerned. We got to do better than that. I'm endorsed by the AFL-CIO. My opponent is literally one of the lowest rated congressmen by the AFL-CIO for his anti-worker voting record. If you're a young person wanting to create a family and a career here, you're not going to feel all that certain that you can do that when you're represented by someone like Congressman Feenstra. So I want to get him out of office as soon as I can to help there too. Beyond that, let's say you've got that checklist checked off bit by bit. You're like, okay, you know what? Maybe I can make this work. Maybe I can create a family here in the 4th District, right? Well, then once you've got those foundational elements in place, you then want to live in a community where you feel safe. And right now, my opponent is doing whatever he can to make our people feel less safe. And why is that? Well, he votes against people of color. He voted against the Crown Act, which would have helped us fight back against discrimination that people of color face in the workplace. He voted against the Equality Act, which would help us fight back against discrimination that people in the LGBTQ+ community face every day. Speaking of the concerns people of color have in our district, the most obvious bill I can imagine that came across my opponent's desk was a bill to simply remove Confederate statues from Capitol grounds. He voted against that. It blows my mind to this day that he voted against that. Again, he is Steve King. His voting record reflects that. He's just wise enough to not say the worst stuff out loud, but it's all there in the voting record. He celebrated the overturning of Roe without an ounce of empathy for people in our district that now face a much scarier world once they become pregnant. He gloats about this. No iota of empathy for them. Beyond that, though, he wants to create and push for a federal abortion ban now. And when KTIV and Sioux City asked him, well, okay, what exceptions would you include? He simply said, I just want people to know how pro-life I am. It's frightening, absolutely frightening. But beyond that, another population here in the district that is disrespected by our congressman, our veterans. Over and over again, our congressman has voted against veterans. He voted against the automatic VA sign-up bill. He voted against expanding education benefits for them. And the most glaring, he voted against expanding healthcare access for up to 3 million veterans that have been victims of toxic burn pit exposure. When asked why, he said out loud on a radio show, "If we do that, there'll be longer wait lines." Yeah, because our veterans are sick and dying. But instead of proposing an amendment that would give the VA the tools they need to absorb that ask for need, he just voted against the whole thing and told them, good luck. Shameful. Gun safety legislation. We as parents and grandparents should not have daily conversations in our households where we're worried about our kids coming back okay. The fact that we're in this space is absolutely unacceptable. The fact that my opponent and our congressman does not see the urgency of the moment is shameful. Every single gun safety bill that he's had come across his desk, he's voted against. Why? Because he doesn't want to inconvenience gun owners, even though gun owners, in an overwhelming margin, are willing to be inconvenienced if it makes our communities safer for our kids. And finally, I'll finish on climate change. Recently, my opponent wrote an op-ed saying he thought he had a very compelling argument here. He said, all President Biden wants to do is he wants us to buy 50,000 electric vehicles from Tesla, which is obviously silly. There's a lot more to it than that. And by the way, you can find an electric vehicle for about $25,000 now. But anyway, but the compelling argument that he made, at least in his opinion, was he said, if the Democrats get what they want, and if we're all driving electric vehicles, there's no escape from our fossil fuel future because the electric grid is fueled by oil and coal. If you did a control F in that op-ed, you would not find wind or solar mentioned a single time. And I'm sure you know why. Just look who bankrolls this campaign. And then I'll end on carbon capture pipelines. This is arguably the #1 issue that comes up when I door knock and have events throughout the 4th District. Congressman Feenstra wrote an op-ed in support of carbon capture pipelines. Again, we know who bankrolls this campaign. We know why. Even though there is intense opposition to these throughout the district. We know that carbon sequestration is a money dump. It's a failed technology. The last thing we should be doing is using eminent domain to take land from people to line the pockets of private corporations. So I did my part. I went to the IUB and joined in the protest there earlier in the week, and I'm going to continue to fight that good fight every day. So my ask of you, thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you so much for your support. I know the odds are tough, but we can win this thing. Again, JD lost by 3% not too long ago, and he ran against someone who has the same voting record that my opponent has now. We can make this happen. I'd appreciate all the support you can provide. Thank you.